everyone, welcome to Unlocked. I am going to do a Q&A session with you today, and yes, I'm going to answer one of your questions. So, Jesse from Alabama states, I've been struggling to kick out a bad habit. That I've had for many years. Every time I set out to begin my day and try not to get into the habit of bad things, it does not work out. How can we get rid of these bad habits? Well, Jesse, and to everyone else who's been there, done that, I'm going to take you through how bad habits are formed, and I'm also going to show you how you can break those bad habits. Of course, you'll need willpower, but hang in there, I'll give you the tips that you need. Welcome to Unlocked. This is my channel. I am Nickita. Unlocked was created to give you the tips and hacks on overall growth in life and career. This is based on a lot of learnings from my own self-development journey and from others that I've learned from. So stay tuned, and we're going to talk about breaking bad habits. But before that, click that subscribe button, guys. Ching, ching, ching. First and foremost, what is a bad habit? So according to the dictionary, a bad habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Hard to give up indeed. So how does a bad habit get formed? So here's where we need to understand the hardware behind all of this bad habit formations or good habit formations, okay? The brain has two areas critical to habit formation based on the publications I've read. One is the prefrontal cortex, right? So this prefrontal cortex, what it does is that it's very good at taking new skills, new thoughts, new behavior that you've introduced, anything that's new or complex or novel, it takes that and processes it really well. The prefrontal cortex is really the part of the brain that's involved in the more complex, higher level, higher conscious learning and processing. What happens here is that the neurons are activated when you feed a new behavior or a new skill to it. Once the neurons are activated, what happens is messages are then sent to the stratum. What the stratum does is it receives these messages from the prefrontal cortex and relays them to other parts of the brains, thereby enabling any sort of action that comes out of it, the thought, the actions, the emotions, the movements. So over time, if you keep repeating a behavior, a skill, or a thought, and you keep feeding it to the brain, what happens is the prefrontal cortex gets less engaged. It's got nothing new to process. So what's any of this got to do with habit formation and habit breaking? Well, here's the deal. Anytime you repeat that behavior, or that information or that skill back to your brain, the prefrontal cortex is less engaged. Why? Because it's repetitive. Neurons are no longer activated. Messages don't have to go to the stratum anymore, they tend to fade. So we get into the zone of without having to think or process information. This is called the habit loop formation. What this tells us is that we need to wire our brains differently. So how do we go about doing that? Hit that subscribe button and we'll go straight into how. First step is to be aware, observe, and understand your cue or trigger. You need to understand what happens just before the behavior or thought is activated. So let's take a simple example. Now, let's say I've been talking to this acquaintance of mine, and every time I talk to this acquaintance of mine, I feel really bad. I feel negative, or I don't feel good. One of the questions I probably ask myself is, what is being said or done in those conversations every single time that triggers a negative thought or a negative vibe within me? The second step is to understand your routine. Now, let's say you have a bad habit of scrolling through your phone before bed. A couple of things you would be asking yourself is, why are you doing that? What kind of content are you looking at? Are you doing this for extended periods of time? Do you go back to sleep quickly right after scrolling through your phone, or you don't? So really understand your routine and really observe what is happening during that routine. The third step is to understand the reward you're getting from this habit. Are you really getting a reward? In fact, if you sat down and analyzed what you were doing, you would probably understand that a bad habit is negatively impacting you than actually providing you a reward that you think there is. When I look at my phone before I go to bed, there's probably some instant gratification I get from the content. It takes my mind off things perhaps, and perhaps it just makes me relax before I go to bed. But the negative implications is that the content that I'm looking at may not be meaningful. And of course, lastly, it takes time away from my sleep or something else I could be doing to increase my productivity. It is important to weigh the rewards against negative implications. More often than not, you'll find that the negative implications part is a lot heavier than the rewards. What this will do is bring a firmer resolve on your part to break that bad habit, and therefore it's important to do this exercise. To recap what I've just said, there's always a cue or trigger that leads to an automatic or almost involuntary response. Now, what happens is that if you keep feeding the same information to your brain, your prefrontal cortex is no longer engaged. And if it's no longer engaged, you'll have less of a conscious control over changing that imbibed neurological pattern in your brain. The only way to break the habit is to understand the cue and observe yourself and understand what the negative implications are. Now that we've said all this, what are the 7 quick ways to change or learn so that you can break that habit? Number 1, manipulate distance. What does it mean? Let's take the phone example. If the phone is far away from my bed, or it's in a different room, or it's in the living room and I need to walk to it to get it, it's more than likely that I'm not going to go and do it, and I'm just going to try and go to sleep. Manipulate distance. So objects that are causing you harm or distractions, put them far away so that you don't have to look at it and you have difficulty reaching in. Second, schedule time in if this is something that's taking up a lot of time. I have a bad habit of watching Netflix a lot. Yeah, a lot. Let's not even get down to the numbers, but what I had to do was schedule some time in. So I would give myself 3 hours every week to watch something on Netflix that I really loved, and the rest of the time would be scheduled for other things. So that's something you could also look at. Number 3, be curious. Explore and replace that habit with something else that's a lot more rewarding. Let's take that phone example. What I decided to do is explore a different activity before bed, and that's reading books. And I found that that was a lot more rewarding and satisfying. And so now I've got a new habit, which is great. So be keen, find something that you love and see if that works for you versus what you're doing now. Number 4, change your environment if you have to and if you can. So if you're a smoker and you're being surrounded by smokers, it is fair to say that you're going to have a difficult time dropping smoking. So surround yourself with those who can really make a change versus those who would probably bring you back into that bad habit. Number 5, persevere even if you fail on certain days. That's right, persevere. I've been there. I have failed on certain days, not being able to kick my bad habits, but there have been days where I've succeeded. And over time, as you put more practice into it, you will end up succeeding more and more. Just remember that slip-ups are natural and that this pattern is deeply encoded in your brain, and so it's going to take trials and tribulations and errors to get to where you want. Number 6, fill in a trusted member or someone that you confide in and let them know that you're making this change so that you get support from them. It's important to have that emotional support. Sometimes when your willpower is lacking, you can fall back on that emotional support. Finally, my last tip, but my most important tip to you is make sure you say you can change and you will change, and you have to believe it. If you don't have this, or you have a slight inch of a doubt, it means you don't have enough of a resolve yet or the willpower to make this change. I would ask you then to go back and revisit all the negative implications that you looked at earlier. and get to a firmer resolve. All of these ways that I've given you today are ways that you can use practically to make that change. I hope that all of these ways that I've mentioned work for you. When you're ready to take that leap of faith, I would love to hear from you in terms of how you're doing. Make sure you drop those comments in and hit that like button. I love to hear back on your progress. With that, I wish you luck, guys, and stay tuned for my next video on Unlocked.